One.
Hello, you good people. Happy Wednesday. Welcome once again to Peikoff Wednesdays. I am joined in this new year uh, by the great mind of James Valliant. James, how are you doing on this first Peikoff Wednesday of the new year?
I am doing really well, thank you, sir. I'm feeling a great sense of anticipation for 2023. I have strong suspicions it's going to bring great things for all of us, including Ayn Rand Center UK this year. We are doing great things and on the verge of making great breakthroughs. So I'm feeling very excited and anticipating a wonderful year ahead.
I couldn't agree more. I have that same feeling. So much of what we've been doing, a lot of what we do is important journalistic work. Love the way, especially on the Daily Objective, but the shows in general, we'll analyze the news of the day, make sure folks know what's going on, how to rationally analyze it, but especially the more personal shows we're doing, and especially our series right now on keeping it real, bringing ideas down to earth, is really having substantial impact on folks. And we're seeing that. We're seeing the feedback online. We're seeing it in the chat. And I do see we've got folks in the chat. Good, because I want to hear what you folks have to think as well. And so you're right. I think 2023 will be the best year yet for most, if not all, of our members and listeners and watchers. And I'm looking forward to it. And that's why I'm glad that you, James, have chosen questions to start out the new year. There have been some great shows recently. Yaron Brook talking to Tara Smith, the interviews with Gene Moroney on HBTV, Harry Binswanger Television, right on the Ayn Rand Center UK. We've been talking about
two of the
goals.
smartest ladies. I don't mean to use a sexist word like lady, but aren't those two of the smartest professional women out there? My God, they're informative and a pleasure to listen to.
I love that because we talk about racism. There's a whole article on racism by Ayn Rand. We don't talk much about sexism. And, I just don't think it comes up in a philosophy that was created by a brilliant woman, but that has so many brilliant women that are part of this philosophy. Right. So many brilliant women.
Right.
Love that. So I'll refer you to those shows for goal setting. Can't beat Gene Moroney on that. But we need to talk more broadly. And a couple of these are conversations we've had before, but this will be specifically, again, about the long range, about building a life, about this new year coming up. And James, you started us out with this question that was asked of Leonard Peikoff by a young adult, or rather a young person. He says, as a young adult, age 14, I have to stop right there. It's interesting that growing up, at 14, we took on a lot of responsibilities. And then as I got older, and I'm a little bit older myself, so this is going back a ways, we were, for example, working newspaper routes or working part-time jobs in, stores, the corner store. And then they started passing laws. Well, you can't do that. You can't do that till you're 16. You can't do these things until you're 18. So I love that this question starts out with, as a young adult, age 14, he says, and lately, I've been feeling depressed because I don't know what I want to do with my life at 14.
Depressed. Whoa.
And then he asks Leonard Peikoff, well, is there a reason I feel this only at night? How can I find what I want to do and change my life to fit that? And Leonard Peikoff has a fairly quick answer, and I think it should be obvious what part of the answer is, but listen to this. Leonard Peikoff says, if you're 14, most kids at 14 don't know what they want. Very rarely, someone like Howard Roark or Ayn Rand would know what they want. The great majority of people, including me when I was young, Leonard Peikoff says, will need to grow up, need to be mature, to explore possibilities, to introspect, and so on. It would be impossible for them at 14. Even at 30, I was still unclear that philosophy was the right field for me. I was finding it very difficult to understand. But the point is that you can't expect that of yourself at 14. All you can do is find your interests, develop your interests in a general way, and worry about that in 5 or 10 years. As far as what you do at night, I would guess you get distracted during the day. You're busy, you're doing other things, so you don't dwell on your misery. If so, well, try to do the same thing in the evening. As to how you find your career, I've made suggestions about that in an earlier podcast. Incidentally, James, we've discussed his answers to that before, and we're going to get into a few of those today. Isn't that interesting, though, that this young man at 14 is saying, yeah, I'm really concerned because I don't know what I want to do with my life.
Well, you know, in another question that he's asked that we're not going to cover today, he talks about Ayn Rand's novels being in part responsible for at least some objectivists having this attitude. Certainly, Ayn Rand's top heroes like John Galton, Howard Rourke, Dagny Taggart, they know from the time they barely are aware of careers, and they seem to know already what they want to do with such astonishing clarity. That is a rare, rare thing. Ayn Rand is writing romantic art. And in those cases, she's writing about very exceptional people. She also obviously discusses people who don't follow and haven't discovered their passions, or perhaps are discovering them later in life. You get, I don't want to do any spoiler alerts, but there are all kinds of mid-level characters like the wet nurse and or Catherine in The Fountainhead and stuff, who are diverted from the effort of trying to find their true goal in life that would have made them happy by bad ideas or bad influences. But the truth is, in reality, Dr. Peikoff's absolutely right. At 14, come on, very, very few people are really going to have that kind of clarity where they know what they want. You see, I even, when I saw Perry Mason as a kid, I said, I would love to be a trial attorney. And that motivated me from the time I was 11. That did not stop me from looking into other things. I worked in a factory. I worked in a bookstore. I worked in various other areas. I intentionally exposed myself to what other people were doing. I tried out art with art class. I tried out, I seriously thought about music. I love music. Maybe music would be it didn't stop me from, but you have to give those things a fair chance too. You have to get into it well enough to know what the living and breathe, because that's what a career is. When I did decide on law, it became my life. I ate and drank and breathed and swam in that world that I created for myself. And that's what you have to do. Know that that's the world and the goals you want to accomplish, the kind of feedback you want, the kind of activities you enjoy doing. And to do that, you've got to live it a little bit, at least. Experience it. Talk to people who are in that field. And it could take years. It could take years. No knowledge is automatic. As Ayn Rand says, we have no innate knowledge, inborn knowledge. If that's what you mean by instincts, humans have no instincts. We have to learn everything, including our own values, our own hierarchy of values. And that requires introspection. And as a young person, it also requires that you get out there and explore different areas. I hate the child labor laws you referred to earlier, frankly. I will proudly say, and I think the statute of limitations is long past on this, I flagrantly violated the child labor laws to work in a factory at the age of 14. But working in a factory at the age of 14 did give me a much greater sense of what I wanted to do. And I could see people next to me finding great joy in design, engineering, manufacturing, all the things that were going on around me. That was their passion. That was their life. And I realized it wasn't mine. But yeah, get out there, try stuff. It's not, none of this knowledge is automatic. And finding out what we love and what we love most is a discovery, something we have to learn.
Just so. And I love thinking of you having been working in a factory, because I think of your later career as you worked in a justice factory. And in many ways, you still do. The Ayn Rand Center UK is an opportunity to continue your work in justice. And speaking of which, I really appreciate seeing the conversation that's going on in the chat. If anybody would like to, and I know you would, like to support the Ayn Rand Center UK, make your chat comment a super chat, and any funds that you contribute go to support the Ayn Rand Center UK. Value for value trade and justice. Furthermore, you can become a member by clicking the link at the top of the chat. It's interesting, you in the context of this question, and we'll get into this with the next couple of questions, folks often mistake their purpose, their life's purpose, for specific goals, specific values. And that's why I love the conversations with Jean Maroney in particular, where her and I have talked, and Yarvin and her have talked about the difference between having a purpose and having values. Your values are not your purpose. Your values shape and inform your purpose, but purpose needs to be in terms of specific goals. So the examples given, I want to be creative. Well, that's not really a goal though. And so it can't be a purpose.
Right.
And let's talk about that. Question number 2 here. Is there any case where public interest exceeds the personal? Now, this sounds like we're talking more about politics or even altruism, but let's look at this here. Leonard Peikoff has asked, for example, I saw a show about a woman who deciphered the Inca language, and all I could think about was the years that she could have spent in a cancer research facility, eliminating disease, instead of solving what is basically a glyph puzzle. How dare she spend all, because somebody of really high intellect could have had an impact on cancer research. And Leonard Peikoff answers, unsurprisingly, I disagree with you completely. This is her life, her mind, her choice, her happiness. If that's what she wants to work in, if that's what her values and premises are oriented around, why in the world do you want to uproot her from that and push her into something that she has shown no interest in so that somebody else will benefit? That is total altruism, if ever I heard it, the sacrifice of one for others. If she has one passion for one activity, the Inca language, she's not going to have it for the cure of cancer. You can't make one person into another, even if it were moral to do, which it isn't. I mean, it's the same idea of think what Howard Rourke could do if we made him head of the California Highway Patrol. And I think that makes the point.
Found that amusing.
Even if somehow you could turn Rourke into an altruist and he would say, okay, I'm giving up everything I love to do this thing I have no interest in. What good would that do anybody? Which, not to suggest that altruism could work. That's the whole point, is altruism is a contradiction in terms. It can't work and it shouldn't work.
Right. To be good at what you do, Howard Rourke explains it very well. To be good at what you do, you have to love the doing.
Yes.
Right. And to love the doing, it has to be really your love of the doing. I think they were a bit flippant in saying that merely solving the Inca language is a mere glyph problem. It is true that depending on the context, the value of curing cancer obviously is immediately great, and we can see that to life. But there is a value to finding it, to recovering the culture of the Incas, even if it is a primitive culture. And, as an objectivist, I'm not a big lover of primitive culture as such, but at least there's knowledge. It's not a non-productive activity. Plus, she's challenging her mind. She is going to be contributing. And I don't want the person who loves doing that to be curing my cancer. I want the person who's curing my cancer to love curing cancer. I want the person to fix the glyph problem be the person who loves fixing the glyph problem. They're the one who is most likely going to give us a productive answer on it anyway. But besides, is the point some collective good? No. If it were, obviously, we would be giving people, we would have people, encourage people to do the things they love to do. But the point is living your life, loving your life. So in the first instance, do we want you want a world of miserable people who are doing things that we think are productive? No, it's still a world full of miserable people. Live your life. Your life has no higher justification it needs to meet some magical requirement. Oh, if I can pay for my life by doing, that's what altruism gets us thinking. It gets us thinking, I can only buy every little bit of joy or happiness by paying some debt to humanity or paying for it in some way. No, your life is your own. It's an end in itself. You don't need to justify your happiness, but seek your happiness. I have known people who changed their career, and get this, people who got their law degrees, got a Juris Doctorate in the field, went out and were a trained lawyer. They stopped being lawyers, went back to something like medical school or psychology school, got their PhDs or MDs because that's what they discovered that they preferred to do. Even if it meant a 10-year, diversion in their whole career to get a whole new education.
Yes.
If that's what's required to do the thing you love to do the thing you love to do. And you'll be better at it because you're good at it. The side effect will be to be a better lawyer or a better doctor, right?
Yes.
The side effect, but your joy is the point. Your fulfillment is the goal, and it needs no higher justification.
I sometimes wonder, is there something about studying law? Because somebody like yourself, for example, also an expert in philosophy and having studied ancient history and religion, but there are so many examples of that. People who were lawyers and you didn't know it because it seems to be popular as writers, including screenwriters. Think of David R. Kelly, not that David Kelly, but the other one who created Boston Legal and Ally McBeal. And there are so many writers who studied law. I wonder if there's something about law that, or maybe it has a limited lifespan. Well, you would know that
Well, there's
better
two
than
things
I
I
do.
would note. A lot of people that I was around in law school were not like me. They were still looking for something to do, and getting a law degree was a fallback, and it seemed respectable and so forth. And those people often did not end up as lawyers, but something else. But also, I think when it comes to writing, law very much focuses on verbal skills, verbal articulation, speaking, and writing skills, persuasive writing. So if you have a linguistic bent, law would tend to be one of the places you'd go into. So I think there's a connection there.
Makes sense. Makes sense. There's a great chat going on right now. For example, we have the comment, yes, I want a doctor who loves being a doctor. It takes me back to the argument about should you be able to force somebody to bake a cake for your wedding? Do you want a cake that somebody was forced to bake? I want to see you take the first bite of that. So yes, I want a doctor who loves being a doctor, not who did it because he thought, well, I don't like this, but it's the greatest good I can do for society.
You won't get good cakes. If you want a decent wedding cake, have someone who's motivated to make this the best cake possible.
Exactly right. So let me jump to question 3 here, because this is going to get even better. I have always pursued values passionately. Oh, that sounds like a good opening for a question to Leonard Peikoff. He says, my goal has always been to prove to myself my own efficacy in as many realms as possible. Now, this is a multi-part question. So Leonard Peikoff stops right there and says, why is that your goal? To prove to yourself your own efficacy means that you are governed by self-doubt. You're pursuing a value not because it's good, but because it will show you that you are not bad. Well, that is not a passion for values. And then the questioner goes on, this has caused me to dilute my efforts and not have any one particular career. I spent years writing an opera, years studying the stock market to make money, years in an intense fitness regimen. Is it self-destructive to pursue many different disciplines like this? Now, before I give Leonard Peikoff's answer, I think his answer is it comes a lot from the way the question was asked, because I think there's more than one answer here. So let me give Leonard Peikoff's answer. Yes, I would say it is because you cannot grow, achieve, or give your full mind to any of them in brief temporal spurts. You have to, as is often said, distinguish between a career and a hobby. 8 hobbies are not a career. You have no long-range continuity in your life. A passionate value cannot coexist with the absence of a career choice, which is the center that makes passionate values possible. On its own terms, I can't disagree with that answer at all.
Right. Well, I mean, think of it as stated. You want to be the best in terms of this fitness regime? Do you want to be the best in terms of creative work? Or do you want to be, and creative work seems awfully vague, creative. But in any event, we'll get back to that.
Well, certainly writing an opera is not a casual thing.
Exactly my point. So you want to be, okay, I want to be Puccini in opera. I want to be an Olympic gold medalist athlete. And I want to be, okay. That is really taking on far too much. Distinguish a hobby between, for me, until, music is a hobby for me. it's not the driving passion of my life. And you have to make this distinction. We can love a lot of things in life. We should all be attentive to our physical health to some degree. None of us should ignore our physical fitness. But the question is that the center? Do you want to be an athlete? Is that the central focus of your life? Do you want to be a trainer, or you want to be a physiologist, something like that? Is that the focus of your life, to be an Olympic athlete? In which case, that does have to be the central focus of your attention. Now, on the other hand, if you want to be an opera composer, I would also say, well, don't ignore your physical health. You can still do enough to maintain your health, eat a good diet, get regular exercise. I think those are still important things, but you don't and probably can't be an Olympic athlete and a Puccini level opera writer at the same time. You're just going to have to make choices, unless you really do have some, Leonardo da Vinci kind of super genius where you can do all this, or an Ayn Rand super genius where you can write brilliant novels and discover an entire new philosophy. Unless you're a genius achieving on that level, and there's very few of us who can, I would recommend focus. I know for myself, I could not have been a concert pianist, a trial lawyer, and an Olympic athlete all at once. Each one of those would have required intense focus and a kind of love, passion, and commitment that intense focus requires. Now, the first bit, to prove to myself, there are so many people that are proving to, what really can undermine self-esteem, proving to dad, I'm still proving to dad that I can do this, or still proving to this other guy, proving to my friends, or proving to the world. That still boils down to your own self-esteem. Don't do it to assuage some insecurity on your part. No, find what you really positively love to do. You're not out there to prove anything to anybody. And if you're trying to prove something to yourself, then you've got an area of insecurity, not a great passion that'll motivate your life.
Good. Because some folks in the chat are saying, well, why be the best when you can improve something that you perceive that may be better in reality? Being the best in relation to others, that does sound like altruism. I would have to agree with that comment.
I would have to agree, if that's what you mean.
As you say, this is, and I'm not the first one to say, this is not a competition with others. This is a competition with yourself.
Right. And when I go about doing something, I never say, I want this to be the best. I want to say this. I want to do this. I want to accomplish the thing itself. The fact that it is good, bad, better in any way compared to something else is not my motivation. That will be something that, in fact, I'll leave that for others to decide when I'm done with it. But the point is, I want to do the best I can. That, in that context, the best means something else. I want to, as a personal challenge, do the very best I can do. In that sense, the best has some meaning. But if you mean prove something to myself, like she stated at the beginning, or he stated, whichever the gender of the questioner was, prove something to dad, or prove something to the world, or prove something to my friends. No, that's insecurity. That's a lack of self-esteem motivating you, not a true passion for the activity.
Yes. So the last bit of the question, this is question number 3. The questioner continues, but I want to be creative, the opera, rich, the stock market, and thin at the same time. How can I do it? And, I love what some of the better life coaches will often use the expression, what does that look like? What would that look like in reality? Because you could certainly be rich, creative, and thin to a degree, but the question is always, if you actually did that, A, what would it look like in reality, and B, would it make you happy? But leaving that aside for a moment, Leonard Peikoff begins his wrap up here. He says, well, I think you have to prioritize. It is fine if you want to be rich, but your career, your chosen career should be the primary. Then, be rich if you can. Unless you want riches so much that you choose a career that you like, that brings you money. As for being thin, I don't see that you need a career to be thin. Maybe he's talking about fitness too. That's something else. You say your other value is to be creative. Well, that is not a value. That is empty in this context. And breaking away from Leonard's answer, that was the crucial point I thought that was made in the discussions about life and purpose and goals versus values. Is I do value creativity, but to say my goal is creativity is empty, as Leonard Peikoff says. There's no content.
Any thought is creative thought if you're really thinking. That's a point of objectivism. Any job you do well, you will be doing creatively. And you know something, any job that's out there that involves any use of the human conceptual faculty can be creative work. It's a question. Creativity, it can span across just about every career there is. So the question is, will you bring creativity to whatever that career is? It's way too vague. It's an abstract value that can apply, as I say, to any productive career. So way too broad a concept there. If you want to be creative, you can do it in just about any job if you apply reason to that job, if you're serious about it. So being wealthy too, in most cases, it's a side effect of doing your job well. If you do your job well and other people appreciate it, and that's a contextual thing, you will find a degree of success. Again, wealth can be a specific goal. At least there, it's a little better than creativity. You've got some concrete flesh on that specific goal. So at least it's a little better, but still, it doesn't change the need. I mean, get rich at what? Do you want to be Warren Buffett? Do you want to invent a new product? Do you want to be a superstar in Hollywood and make your millions? There are a lot of ways to be rich. Again, like creativity, it's a sort of a side effect, though, for what really should be the focus, what you're doing. It's the doing. Love what you're doing, as Howard Rourke says. That's the key. That's really the key. Now, do we all want to be rich and thin and creative at what we do? All of that is all of that can be accomplished, but the hierarchy of your values, whether you're an Olympic athlete, a stockbroker, or an investment banker, or like Jonathan Hoenig, a brilliant hedge fund manager, that has to be a focus. Or being an Olympic athlete, super fit, that has to be your focus. But you can pursue money and you certainly should pursue to a minimal degree your health. All those can be and should be subordinate values and an important part of your hierarchy of values. I'm not denying any of that as being part of the things that we're seeking, but the focus here has to be on the doing of what we love, finding that thing that really gives us the joy in the doing. That's really the key, and that's a concrete thing and a thing we have to discover. But it's no conflict with all of our other values. Having a prosperous, income, or at least prosperous enough, or having a healthy body and, living a soundly healthy, long life as long as we can live. Those aren't inconsistent with those. It's just a question of understanding your hierarchy. And as you say, some of that is just way too abstract to really serve as a concrete goal.
Yes. So Leonard Peikoff wraps up by saying, you should ask yourself why you worded your question that way. I think that's the key to the problem, and I have to agree with that. Yeah. And we've been talking about folks who are wondering in the beginning or the middle of their lives, but the next question Leonard Peikoff was asked was, after 10 years, I finally figured out what I want to do with my life. Would it be smarter to jump in now, taking out a loan to finance the schooling I need, or to wait longer and save up? Now, I actually listened to the audio version of this. This is as it was reprinted in the book, but the questioner did point out that he'd been in debt before. He's very cagey, having finally paid off debt and credit cards and about taking out loans. And Leonard Peikoff is aware of that as he answers his question. He says, in my opinion, given a choice like that, I would say go for it. Go for the career that you really want. Don't let one more year pass. Oh, do I appreciate an answer like that?
Yeah, man.
He says, if you know now what your passion is, and that's what you mean by knowing what you want to do with your life, then no matter what the state of your finances, and no matter how much you hate borrowing money, nothing should take precedence over that. You've got years to catch up to get where you want to be at your stage of life. Don't waste any more time on secondary considerations. If, practically speaking, you've taken on an obligation or a contract that requires you to remain in the situation you're in because of monetary reasons, well, that's something you've voluntarily chosen. You can't throw it over without the consent of the people involved. But assuming that there will be more borrowing weighing on you and not the violation of any contracts, then certainly I would say go for it. And then real quick, he says, however, the most important question for people who change careers in midlife is that you must know that this really is what you want, that life, because it is the substance of your life in your daily living, as against you're bored with what you do and the distant fields look green and there's some novelty in the new field. So he makes the point that it's not a decision you would make lightly,
Right.
but it's precisely because it's such an important decision to make.
But as stated, the guy says, I finally found what I really, and if he means that, if he finally has found and knows, really knows what he really loves to do, then don't waste a nanosecond. Don't let anything else get in the way. Make that the whole focus. In fact, I'd be, if necessary, I'd be taking 2 jobs and doing working myself to the bone to get myself in a situation where I can prepare myself for that. And you know, it's not a trap. It does. We have a limited lifespan, but it's not a total tragedy to find this later in life. At least you found the thing that you love. Just to have the experience of doing something that you really love to do is just, for me, it's the essence of living. It's the essence of life. Doing that which a productive activity that challenges your mind and supports your life. You know, to find that kind of joy in the doing is itself such an achievement. That, like I say, is not automatic. It sometimes takes years to discover. And when you have made that discovery, do not hesitate. That's the most important thing in life. Believe me, the greatest rewards and the greatest long-term joys are going to come from that. Besides, that's what you're going to be doing every day. You got to love the doing. So when you find something like that, if you really are sure that's what you love to do, move heaven and earth. Move heaven and earth, and don't waste a second. Dive in all the way.
Excellent. Yeah, Leonard Peikoff gives more analysis, but he wraps up his answer saying, if you have this passion from a bolt out of the blue, and it seems completely unrelated to anything you know about yourself earlier, then I would question it for a little while. Try to define what you really like and why you didn't see any aspect of it growing up. If you can do that, well, if you can do that, I would say still go ahead. But in any event, don't waste time because you've lost years already. I'm not saying that critically, this is Leonard Peikoff, but just factually.
Right.
You know, I love Benjamin Franklin's quote, "Dost thou love life? Then do not squander time, for that is the stuff that life is made of." It's finite. There's only so much, you can't get it back. So love that question, and especially love that answer.
And to discover what you really love, and to let anything else unnecessary, that's, you know, like he says, there are practical considerations, but, you know, contracts or whatnot in the context we're in, of course. But apart from that, to let anything that you could choose or that's optional interfere with doing what you love, what on earth could justify that? What is the greatest possible value you can find in life but finding a fulfilling purpose and career that can give focus and hierarchy to all your other values? When Ayn Rand says that a central purpose is one of the 3 key values, the 3 most important values that you can have ethically: reason, purpose, self-esteem. Purpose. Why? Why is it important? Why is it so supreme a value in her hierarchy of values as a moral philosopher? It gives focus. It orders our hierarchy of value. It directs everything else in my life, pretty much. Everything else accounts for it. And once you have not having a central purpose is debilitating. Like put it in the, look at it the negative way. Absent a central purpose to your life, you have no such focus. It must be confusing, debilitating, a moment of transition. It must be a moment of transition or discovery. And once you found that purpose, grab on like a pit bull and never let go.
Outstanding. Now, I've got to give a huge shout out to Michael Sweet in the chat with a super chat who says, Happy New Year. I read these a few weeks ago. I love that people are reading Keeping It Real as we go through the series. And Louise in the John Galt, if you're not already on the John Galt line group on Facebook and you use Facebook, that's the group to be in. She's been posting some of these as well. And Michael says, Happy New Year. I read these a few weeks ago. It is so important to accept and rush to what is absolutely what you want to do. And he says, and like me, define the type of work that would produce the joy and you would enjoy doing. Again, that's why I love the expression, what does that look like? If you were to think, if I had the freedom, if I had the resources, if I had the permission from myself and people who care about me, if I was designing the ideal life, what would that look like? And do any of the things that are currently stopping me right now, do any of those things deserve to stop me?
Right. He put it so well. That was a brilliant formulation.
Thank you. Because again, as we move through the questions, we're kind of moving on in age to people who are, closer to or even past our age. The last question here. Can one have a happy retirement past the age of 70, this questioner asks, while existing off past productivity with no attempt at new productivity? So let's say you had a great career, you're 70 years old, the money is in the bank, that's not the issue anymore. Do you still need to be productive? And that to me is an interesting question, because to me, that's not that long a time horizon, 10, 20 years from now. If all of the quote unquote problems of life are solved, well, then what? So Leonard Peikoff starts his answer off this way, and we can talk about this. He says, I just say flat out, no. And he answered to this in 2008. So he was already past that age when he answered this. He says, you don't have to have a super demanding productiveness. You don't have to make it full time. But in my experience of myself and others, if you just say, okay, I've had it now with any long range function, any long range thought, I'm just going to drift now because, that's what it means if you give up productiveness in any form. I'm just going to go shopping one day and to the beach another day and lie around and watch TV or play computer games or whatever. Then you die. You atrophy mentally. They have evidence of this. There's correlation between retirement, in which you do nothing, and an earlier death rate. And I think you can see why. You're giving up one of the crucial things that make you have a direction in life: self-esteem, a functioning mind. Now, I don't care if you're 90. You don't have to be productive in the sense of turning out wealth. Even if you just say, for instance, I love bridge. Now I've got time to play bridge, but I'm not just going to play a game here and a game there. I want to learn bridge. I want to compete in it. I want to get somewhere. Well, that's fine. I would count that as productivity because, believe me, I've tried. Bridge certainly uses the maximum of your mental capacity, much more than philosophy ever would. And then he wraps up saying, so that's my answer. I do not believe in retirement until you're senile, in which case you don't have to worry, or you're just physically impaired and you can't do anything. At that point, you're basically in the process of dying. Now, that's interesting to me, and I think it's 100% correct.
Yeah. Oh, well, my goodness. You wonder about people who have that attitude. I begin to think about what was their career all about. They were just putting in time so that they could stop doing anything. They were waiting for that great liberating moment of, quote, retirement, where they could do nothing and just be lazy and let the law of cause to bypass them. What was their career to them in the first place? I would have to ask myself.
Yeah,
because
it's like a cosmic version of working for the weekend.
Exactly. I mean, that's the funny thing is that every time in my life where I have a central purpose for it, and I've had more than one in the course of my, now almost 60 years on this planet, it has, the whole thing is that I could not imagine ever coming to a point where I would stop. I'm going to keep doing this until I can no longer do this. I'm going to keep doing this until I can no longer talk or think or my arms fall off. And that's it. I'm just going to keep going until I don't see an end to my productive. And I really can't imagine anyone planning a career with a time spot where they say, okay, that's where this ends, and I no longer have a productive purpose in my life. I no longer have a central joy that sort of sets the hierarchy, as I was saying earlier. I don't know how I'd go about valuing and living and doing everything else in my life. Like I say, it sets the agenda for my whole life to have a central purpose. It gives me this joy and this self-esteem that can't be found anywhere else. Do I want that ever to come to an end? No. I want to live, and I want to live to the last minute. I want to keep living as long as I'm really alive. And so I cannot, so that's what go back to the 14-year-old. Strange to be depressed at 14 that you haven't found your central purpose in life. Almost sad, really, because it takes time. But take the time, have that experience. But once you've found it, that's your life. That's your whole being. And don't ever stop living. It's like someone saying, stop eating, stop breathing, stop thinking. I couldn't imagine that. I couldn't imagine where living a life in a world of values that isn't set and structured by a central purpose. We all do need that. We all need that till, as Dr. Peikoff says, we're there on the verge of actually dying.
Yes. Now, see what you think of this, because I think one of the reasons why we sometimes mistake values for for goals, why we sometimes think I want to be rational and that's my central purpose, where that's not a goal, that's not a career, that's not a job you can go out and say I'm going to go out and be rational.
Right.
But it's interesting, and to me this was a bit of a bombshell. Gene Maroney presented at OCON now this was in Austin in Texas. Man, was that a great OCON. And Gene Maroney made a simple statement as part of her talk about central purpose that for a lot of people opened a lot of eyes. She said central purpose is not always a lifelong specific goal. And that for most of the people she works with, central purpose is revisited every 5 to 15 years. And that their central purpose will change, not to something, necessarily radically different than what it was before, but it does change. And that was interesting. And she made the point, as Leonard Peikoff said earlier in our discussion today, not everybody is Ayn Rand or Howard Rourke and has a central purpose that they know at 5 years old and that is unchanged throughout their entire lives. That was liberating to me, because I know people, and I think I'm one of those people, for whom our values haven't changed, but our specific goals have. And that was fascinating to me.
During the course of my life, like I say, I kind of knew I wanted to be a trial lawyer from an early age. That didn't stop me from trying other things and testing the waters and other things. But I did become a trial lawyer. And after almost 18 years of being a trial lawyer, I had to change my career for health reasons. And there are all kinds of reasons. I mean, not just health reasons, but there can be all kinds of circumstances that come up in life where we can make a discovery about ourselves. Say, hey, no, this is really the angle I wanted to take on it. And so we take a new left turn where we didn't think we were going to make a left turn there in our career. But she makes an astonishingly good point. We have to continuously revisit that. Sometimes it is involuntary. Sometimes for circumstantial or health reasons, or for reasons that we make in our own life, discoveries we make, we have to change. So constantly monitoring that purpose doesn't change our values. Our values remain the same. It's a question of what our specific purpose is. And sometimes we have to revisit that and revisit that repeatedly in the course of our life. And it can be a hard thing to do. If we love, like me, I loved what I was doing. I was excited going to work every day. I would feel such reward doing what I was doing. Happiness is what happened. So when I could not, for circumstantial reasons, do that, and I had to rethink my central purpose, it was a real, well, I would say, I wouldn't call it existential crisis, but it was definitely a moment where I had to revisit, rethink, and it did cause certain emotional stresses in my life that were very serious, about having to refocus on a new purpose. But it was a new specific purpose that incorporated all of the same values that I'd had all along, and still matched my own interests, aptitudes, and joys. So she makes an outstanding outstanding point about purpose. Something that needs to be revisited and sometimes has to be revisited repeatedly in the course of a lifetime. So this is an ongoing challenge that the 14-year-old, it's not just the 14-year-old, it's the 30-year-old, it's the 50-year-old who may have to reassess this, and maybe should, as we go through life, constantly be reassessing this. Sometimes involuntarily, sometimes just because new information comes up. Be open to the possibilities of life. But none of that alters the fact that we really do need a central purpose to our lives to help set our hierarchy of values. Make it something you love, make it something that you enjoy, make it something that's part of you, so that, like I say, the doing of it is you're eating it, you're breathing it, you're swimming in it. That's what a career you love can be, and ideally should be.
Yes, that's why I love business cards that are somewhat aspirational. This is what I am, this is what I do. Huge shout out to Frederick Fisher, who is in with a super chat, no question, just supporting the ARCUK, and we very much appreciate that. Yeah, James, I said earlier, and I've said before, I think of you as having worked in the justice factory, and that is the theme of that you have always fought for truth and justice. You're still doing it now. You've done it in the 2 books behind you there that everybody can see and should have read by now. And you're doing that here on the Ayn Rand Center UK. And if values can unite our purposes as they evolve over the courses of our lives, I think when I think of you, I think of truth, I think of justice, I think of you fighting for both of those. And that stands out when folks watch the recent documentary released about your book with Warren Fay, Creating Christ. That documentary is out there, folks. If you haven't seen it yet, do a quick search. It's expanded. It's on all the services now. So whatever you're signed up for, you can watch that, and you should.
Well, thank you very, very much. Really, if I were to pick one word that unifies the different purposes I've had, because I've had more than, through the course of my life, more than one central purpose that motivated me, one at a time, but more than one through the course of the whole lifetime, I would pick the word justice. Justice to Ayn Rand was where it began. Justice on the street level as a DA. Yeah, justice has been the thing that's motivated me. And so the value didn't change. It's the concrete implementation of that, pursuing that value, that changed. But I don't mind using myself as an example there. But thank you, sir. And when I think of you, what I think of is love, love for life, love for humanity. And you are, and again, whatever purpose, whatever you put your hand to, sir, exhibits the signature of love, a love of life, a passionate love of life that is inspiring to me. So yeah, the values are there. How we implement them may need to change in the course of a lifetime, but you still stand for a love of life and humanity that you practically embody in every word you say and everything you do, sir. So yeah, values are one thing. Purpose, a specific central purpose is another.
Yeah, as I would say to folks, don't mistake the one for the other, but I would also say know them, know your values,
right.
Know your current central purpose, which again is long range. Over time, you wake up every morning, everything is oriented around that. Even if you're taking time off of it on a vacation, you know, yeah, what I'm taking a vacation from and what I'm eager to get back to is that purpose, and then your specific goals along the way. We talk about that over New Year's. Know those 3 things about yourself, and it makes you both more productive, but also it increases your self-esteem. It increases your self-confidence to know, yes, I am a writer and I am producing this work, and the values that inform that I think of myself as a solutions person, but You're right. Love would be my motto for life is values are primary. You're here to live a life and not just to fight evil, although that's necessary. So yes, your life is an end in itself. Thank you for that,
I
James.
think of you as someone who embodies the love of life, sir.
You
Maybe
are
I'll always think of you that way, but you're the incarnation of a love of life,
I
my
will,
friend.
I will say modestly, you're very kind, and immodestly, I think you're right. So as folks are talking to themselves, to their friends, to whoever they're working with about their goals for the year coming up, I definitely encourage you, go back on the ARC UK channel and Yaron Brooks channel too. Find those discussions with Gene Maroney. Find that discussion that Yaron Brook had about his year end, looking back on the past year, and that will help inform some of your thoughts about the year coming up. The interview with Tara Smith was outstanding. Personally, I think you and I, James, did some great shows on this toward the end of the year.
Yes, yes. There is nothing more important. I mean, your life is an end in itself. Your survival, your life, your prosperity, your happiness, it is an end in itself. It is the goal. Don't let anything else take priority over that. But to understand that as your priority requires that you get all of the wonderful values that there are in life in the hierarchy required to achieve your happiness, to achieve your success. And that varies from Robert to James to Daniel to Jeff Bannister to Louise to all of us. We each have to, and that requires self-discovery and a devotion to one's own values. Yes. Don't let anyone stop you and say that's selfish, that's arrogant, that's too, you're too self-absorbed. No, there is nothing more important than finding the great joy, what motivates you in life, what you enjoy doing. And believe me, when you find that and make that your central purpose in life, all the other values in your life will fall into, if you approach it rationally, will fall into their appropriate place in order to achieve that central purpose. But we all need a central purpose. I think that's the thing here. Even if it takes time, take the time when you're young to discover that. Give that the time and attention it needs. Very, very few of us are Howard Rourke, John Galt, or Dagny Taggart in that we know by 14 what we want to do. And on the other hand, make it a joy in life that you don't even want to give up when you're 70. And you want to keep doing it until your hands give out.
Outstanding. As Leonard Peikoff somewhat tearfully remembers Ayn Rand saying toward the end of my 30th with Ayn Rand, she told him, don't ever give up what you want most in life. The struggle is worth it. I couldn't wrap it up much better than that, but you mentioned Jeff Bannister. I've got to throw a huge shout out. I don't think he's in the chat today, but when he hears this show, again, thank you so much for your contribution to the ARC UK last week. And he made it during our show, James, which certainly made my whole day.
It made mine too.
Something that I don't usually do, even though the folks at ARC UK have invited me to, is publicize my Sunday show. James, you've done that better than I have. But on Sundays, Amy Nasir, Mrs. Nasir, and I throw a huge podcast party. No, we do a show on Sundays at 6 p.m. Eastern called 5 Minutes with Robert and Amy Nasir. And I've got to throw a huge shout out and thanks to Jeff Bannister, who did send us a contribution at the end of the year. Thank you so much for that. I'll give him thanks on the Sunday show as well. And all that's left for me to say is coming up on the Daily Objective, a story I hadn't heard about, but apparently is making waves. And there's nobody better than Jonathan Honig to talk about it. The show title is What Benedict Cumberbatch Owes Barbados. And I thought, well, what's that all about? Well, looking at the headlines, it says Benedict Cumberbatch owes millions to Barbados after officially becoming a republic in 2021 and leaving 396 years of the British monarchy's control over the island. Barbados government officials have begun to seek reparations from the descendants of one-time slave-owning families. It's one of those things where folks talk about this and you read it in books like White Fragility, but you don't think it's ever going to come to pass, that anybody's going to actually try to get somebody like Benedict Cumberbatch to pay reparations, not for anything he did, but for something his descendants or his ancestors did. Unbelievable. So looking forward to hearing that.
Yeah.
That's 6 p.m. UK, 1 o'clock Eastern time.
That's got to be great. Yeah.
That's going to be a good episode. Looking forward to that. James, thank you so much for the discussion. Again, I'm kind of blown away by everything that we had the opportunity to talk about last year. The end of the year shows I think we're outstanding in regard to this topic of setting goals, figuring out what you want 2023 to look like. And a big part of what I want it to look like is going to be spending more time with you, talking about these ideas and cashing in on them. It's great to see folks in the chat and folks that I've seen on the social networks talking about how these ideas and our discussions about them have made a substantial impact on their lives. I couldn't ask for anything better than that.
Nor I, sir. Thank you. And I look forward to another year of these outstanding discussions. They've meant a lot to me. And from what I can read, they're meaning a lot to others too. So thank you, sir. What a great year we have ahead.
Outstanding. Thank you, everybody. And we will talk to you next week on Wednesday for Peikoff Wednesdays. Join us again on the Daily Objective shortly on this channel in an hour. In the meantime, have yourselves an outstanding day, a great week, a great month of January, and outstanding 2023.
Happy 20.